Australia's ban on social media for children under 16 takes effect next month. Ahead of the new law, teenage social media influencers are looking to relocate to places like the UK. So, how effective will Australia's law be? Should Europe now follow suit? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, it's being hailed as a world first. Australia is banning children under 16 from having social media accounts. TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook and Instagram are poised to deactivate accounts registered by these younger users. Companies that do not comply risk being fined $32.5 million.
It's a controversial move by the Australian government, a ban on under 16s using social media, which its Prime Minister says is causing harm to children.
Platforms now have a social responsibility to ensure the safety of our kids is a priority for them. We're making sure that mums and dads can have that different conversation today and in future days. We've got your back is our message to Australian parents.
The new law was introduced following concerns over the negative impact of social media, from cyberbullying, body image pressure to addiction to the apps themselves. Platforms prohibited include TikTok, Snapchat and Instagram, who will notify their more than 1 million teen account holders to either download data, freeze their profiles or lose their accounts altogether. But there are questions over how it will be enforced.
I don't think there's a way really even to police it. I don't think it actually will change a lot because I don't see that there's really a strong way to police it.
I think that it's a good idea. I think that it's got the right intentions. I think that sometimes kids can be too young and social media are exposed to a lot of things that probably shouldn't be exposed to when you're younger.
While Australian teenage influencers such as Charlie from the Empire family are against the idea and are relocating to the UK to avoid the new law.
What do you guys think of the new ban that's coming in for Australia for under 16s? Lucky for Charlie, she's only 14, but we're going to be living in London and she's a British citizen as well, so it won't actually affect her. It's only for Australians under 16 years old.
Australia's ally, the European Union, currently has no plans to follow suit, but France is threatening to go it alone and ban under 15s if no EU consensus is reached. The Danish government is also implementing a minimum age requirement of 15 years old on certain platforms. With the law set to kick in on December 10th, other Western countries will be watching closely to assess whether they should adopt similar laws and if the measure really will help protect teenagers from the potential dangers of social media.
Well, let's get stuck into this one. Joining me from Perth in Western Australia is the journalist and broadcaster Oly Peterson. In Bristol, in the west of England, we have Guyatt. He's a technology journalist who also used to work at Instagram and Facebook. And here with me in the studio, I'm delighted to say we have Charlotte Ricca. She's a performance psychologist and mindset coach. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Oly, to you, tell us how people in Australia are feeling about this impending ban.
It's quite mixed, to be honest, Enda. I think it depends if you have children who are of the age who are going to be particularly affected by this. So I'm talking about 13, 14, 15-year-olds and their parents. And when I hear it on the talkback lines on radio here in Australia, it is fantastic. It's great. It's wonderful. It's going to get our children off devices. It's going to help them get off social media. It's going to help them stop being bullied. On the other hand, though, for a lot of young people, this is the key to communication. It is through their mobile phones. It is through being able to use their social media accounts. So, look, there's a lot of uncertainty, to be perfectly frank, at the moment, Enda. And I think that this is quite a multi-layered and it's a different answerable approach, really, to be perfectly honest here, depending on the age of your children. As a father of a 4 and a 7-year-old, I think it's great because they've never been on social media and they probably never now will go on social media till they're of an age where they're legally allowed to do it or just before. But there is just a lot of uncertainty here in Australia and technically how exactly this is going to work without the need of a digital identification card.
Well, let's ask Will that question. Will, is this even policeable, if that's a word?
Absolutely not. And many people will tell you, and lobbyists will tell you, that the sophistication of this technology is improving. But last time I checked, a couple of months ago, we're still talking 65 to 70% accuracy. So there's still going to be a great number of young people using these platforms when it's illegal. And the other challenge you find is, and it's certainly one of the discussions I'm having on talk radio stations up and down the length of the UK. Parents need to actually do more too. It's not just tech companies or making a big bold decision like this. And I've got a 7-year-old as well, and I'm terrified about what happens when she gets on social media. But at the same time, I see the value and the place of social media as part of a balanced and controlled existence. And that doesn't need to be a government deciding whether something's banned or not in order for that to happen. There needs to be more conversations, more education at schools, more societal conversations. In the UK, they used to call them public information films. Things like don't go into a power substation when it's switched on, be careful with fireworks. There almost needs to be some kind of mass education of the boundaries that should be set around technology, because nobody's ever been taught that.
But Will, the fact remains childhoods were a lot more simple and a lot more fun before social media came along.
That's your opinion, Enda. That's the challenge.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong, Will?
Yes, I would think you are wrong. There are many, many benefits to technology. The phone or the smartphone most of us have in our pockets is 75,000 times more powerful than computers that took humans to the moon. That does make life consistently more challenging for young people. I go through a battle every night where my daughter wants to use her tablet, but I want her to read a book. That doesn't mean I should stop her from using those platforms and those services, because it is no different to our predecessors in the 1960s, suggesting that rock and roll music was dangerous to children.
Thank you, Will. This is a brilliant debate. Charlotte, where do you sit on this? Clearly, it is damaging for some young people, social media.
It is, absolutely. It's interesting. I totally agree with what Will was saying about the fact that it's not controllable. But going back to yours about the research, it isn't yet scientifically proven. So there is correlation, but not causation. So it's kind of like saying ice cream causes sunburn, because you can see the two rising together at the same time. It's because it's hot that the two are rising together at the same time. So mental health problems and overuse of the internet, well, it's a correlation, not causation. You're not necessarily, do you see what I mean? That doesn't mean that the social media is causing the mental health problems. Okay, it could also be that you're basically suffering the mental health and therefore you're spending more time shut in your room online. So it's not yet scientifically proven. So to me, it feels like quite a knee-jerk response. I think it's a political response to parental anxiety. I think it puts, it's kind of like blaming and punishing the children. And actually, they're the ones, the internet wasn't built for kids. It wasn't designed for kids. And all of a sudden, they're shut in their rooms for hours on end on the internet. So absolutely, we do need to take more control. I agree there needs to be parental responsibility. We need to model good behaviour. If we're sitting on our phone all the time, we can't expect our kids not to be doing the same. I think it's going to be so hard to control. I mean, just as we used to climb out of the bedroom windows to go and get booze from the offie, you know, they're not stupid. They'll get VPNs. You know, they will get around this. They will find ways to get on TikTok. And also already about 85% of kids aged 8 to 12 are using these platforms that have got a 13 plus limit on. Now, I've got a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old, so I'm deep in it. And I remember when my son was, before being 13, begging to go on TikTok, and it was a whole discussion. And, you know, I just think that a ban, A, they'll get around it, and B, if you ban something, it becomes more desirable, more lurable. And also, what it does then, if you're not controlling it and monitoring it, I feel like it's a little bit, it's like a really blinkered response. It's very black and white. And I think these kids will they'll find other ways to get around it.
Thank you, Charlotte. Oly, to you, you often interview Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. He's been very vocal on this. Just give us your impression of why he has acted.
Look, I think that the intention of this by the Prime Minister here, Anthony Albanese, is just quite simply to be able to put in that law to say, until the age of 16, yep, you're not allowed to access social media. Of course, there's going to be a lot of people that get around that. There might even be parents that set up those accounts for their children. But I think his intention here is that to give parents that power to be able to say, hey, look, the law in this country is you can't get on there till you are 16. Like the law in this country is you can't drink that bottle of alcohol until you're 18. So I think that's the intention of this. And the bullying statistics in this country, which I'm sure are replicated right around the world, is that pretty much almost these days, every single school student has been bullied online. And most likely they have been bullied by somebody who is in their school or in their year group or in their class. And this is something that is obviously talked about widely in Australia. And it is something that has been encouraged by a lot of those anti-bullying interest groups and those anti-bullying foundations that have been set up as, hey, can you do something? Now, do I believe that this is the silver bullet? This is going to resolve bullying. Everyone's going to be all of a sudden overnight become resilient, and that we all, sit around the campfire again and we're never on our mobile phones and we're a much happier society? No.
Oly,
Will it work? I'm quite unsure myself, to be honest.
Oly, I noticed one family from Perth hit the headlines, the Empire family. They decided that because their children had such huge following on social media platforms and on YouTube, that they have relocated to London. They've moved all the way from Western Australia to England so that the children can have access to those numbers and content creation. I mean, that's quite extreme.
Oh, it is extreme, and we've seen that. I mean, there's a lot of teens who've been very successful online or built up businesses or profiles or, yes, an online presence online. So I don't think we can be naive to that. And I know that there's a lot of other countries around the world that are looking to see what happens in Australia and if it works, if they implement that as well. So, look, there's got to be, and there's a big grey area in here, obviously, and that needs to be addressed, because if there are content creators, and that's a legitimate, obviously, form of a career these days, how are you going to shut them down in a month's time?
Thanks, Oly. Let's bring Will in on the European angle to this. Will, I've read that Denmark is going to follow Australia's lead and ban social media for under 15s. One incredible statistic in Denmark, 94% of under 13s already have social media profiles in Denmark.
Yeah, and that is not the fault of the social media companies. That's the challenge. Going back very quickly to the Australian relocation, the parents should really answer how much money they're making from this, because that is the decision that's driven the move to the UK. It's not about freedom of expression. That's about a family making a tidy sum of cash from their children being influencers. But when it comes to Europe and the rest of the world, there is a discussion, and I agree entirely. The world is watching what happens in Australia. But I can't help but feel, and a line I commonly use, Mark Zuckerberg has not given your child that smartphone. He hasn't installed WhatsApp on the device. He hasn't added Snapchat or Instagram, for example. So there is still, and parents are being far too passive in this conversation about technology and the discussion. It should be okay for parents to admit they don't understand technology or its impact on society, and they should be able to get help and support. And in that instance, a ban from a government might make sense. But at the same time, banning social platforms or restricting users from those platforms before the people involved have been given the tools to at least have a go at handling the situation is hugely intriguing. The parents of those kids who are bullying people online should be more accountable. It's not Mark Zuckerberg's fault.
Will, you say parents don't understand technology, but one dad who absolutely did was Steve Jobs, and he did not want his children having devices. What does that tell us?
It tells us that Steve Jobs, a man 15 years or so ago, made a decision about what he was doing with his own family. And people are entitled to make whatever decisions they like about technology. It's as clear as that. Certain people have beliefs in life, and I'm not going to challenge those. I know that if taken in balance and used correctly, technology has an important role in people's lives. Would I give my 7-year-old a smartphone like I've seen in restaurants and in shopping centres and stuff when I travel around the UK? Absolutely not. But I will train her and get her to understand how to use technology and to have it as part of a conversation with an adult in the room, not something that should be done privately upstairs or not discussed with mum or dad.
Thanks, Will. Charlotte, it's interesting that nowadays the classroom bell goes at 3 p.m. Children go home, but because of technology and apps and communication, the classroom and any incidents during the day also come home with the child. Do you think there's a psychological impact there?
Yeah, hugely. And one thing I'm interested on is that, am I right that WhatsApp isn't being banned? Is that right?
Oly will bring us up to speed. Oly, will children still have access to WhatsApp?
Yeah, they will still have access to WhatsApp.
And I have
being used.
Yeah, I mean, I have personal experience as a parent of the bullying that goes on WhatsApp. So by stopping TikTok or YouTube or the other platforms, they've still got access to social media. They've still got access to WhatsApp. And I think that it's community is really important to kids. We know that. And I think that the likes of WhatsApp can bring about community. But undoubtedly, what happens is they do go into a very insular world. And I know it sounds like we're talking in cliches, but once upon a time, we know they were out playing and they come home from school and it's very, very insular. And now my son's big into gaming and he games with his friends. And so there is some interaction which kind of slightly appeases me. But I feel that the ban on social media is not going to prevent, I don't personally think it's going to prevent bullying because, like I say, if you can still got access to WhatsApp, then you still got access to cyberbullying. I think it's that fine line of parental responsibility, but also I'm not sure I totally agree with Will about, I think the platforms have a massive responsibility to this. I really do. There's billions been spent on super smart algorithms, creating content that's placed in front of our children, and much more could become preventative. I think it's like the idea, it's like a digital communal space. It's the idea of being at your local, say you go to your local town, and in the town centre, there was graffiti. So, there was hate graffiti. We would take it down, and be horrified if it wasn't. But so why are we not horrified when it's not removed from the internet? And that is not parental responsibility. That is responsibility of the tech companies.
Thanks, Charlotte. Oly, talking of those companies, in Australia, they complained, they moaned, they lobbied, and ultimately now they're all falling into line.
Look, they are falling into line, but exactly how this is going to work is still the multi-million-dollar question, to be perfectly honest, Enda, because we just don't know. A lot of the tech companies are saying they're going to basically use AI by having a look at a photograph that you might post on your social media account and determine whether or not you are 13 or whether you are 15. And then somehow you have to verify your address. But at this stage, the tech companies will not have to store that data, or you will not be required to confirm your identity, because children don't actually have identity cards. They don't have licenses, and they're not going to be asking for that passport information. So I still think there is a lot to play out in exactly how the tech companies are going to be able to verify somebody's age.
Will, just come in on the companies and the money involved here. Is there a fear, do you think, that there could be a generation of Australians now, 5-10 years down the line, who basically just think, OK, I haven't had social media and I don't want it?
We don't know, and it's a glorious social experiment for the rest of the world to look at. But be under no illusion, age verification does not exist. Age estimation is getting slightly better, and that's what these companies are relying on. And I could envisage, if this rule and policy didn't spread around the world and they couldn't get age verification right at a certain point, if it's worth their money to do it, they might get sick and tired of fines in the local market and pull out of markets. They've threatened it before. It wouldn't be entirely impossible, but you find yourself in a very interesting situation when you're a tech company. I believe that tech companies should absolutely do more to solve problems and remove content. But when you're completely beholden to a government, it means you're completely beholden to hundreds of governments around the world, and they all have different demands. So that's where this kind of stuff gets challenging. But the world is definitely watching Australia to see what comes from this, whether or not fines get applied, how children react, what the result is in 18 months. And in 5-10 years' time, if I'm still around doing this job, do we talk about Australia as being, the wisest, sagest company in doing something to break an undoubtedly a huge challenge of modern life?
And Will, just in your experience, what are the social media platforms that children are primarily using?
Well, if you're looking at platforms that kids are using, intriguingly, we're talking the TikToks of the world, the Snapchats of the world. But my understanding, and Oly may well correct me, is this doesn't include games like Roblox and other platforms that are used with a social element. So you communicate with friends and strangers on those platforms and those services. It's almost like somebody has taken a view and decided that a small number of social networks are the cause of all the problems, not the chat sites and other services that kids use. And as we previously said, WhatsApp remaining live and able for use, there's also, very strong suggestions that there might equally be issues and problems there.
Charlotte, just come in on that. I'm guessing you don't agree.
So which bit don't agree with?
Just about the platforms and the companies, Roblox and these things that kids are using.
Well, exactly. Well, I think that, as we were saying, it's really difficult because it is like someone's just fairly arbitrarily said they're the ones that we're going to ban, but what about the rest of them? And my son has been a regular user of Roblox. In fact, there's something about in the press recently, which I was reading about on the way here, funny enough, about someone who went on and pretended to be an 8-year-old child and then was subjected to someone pretending to be another child interacting with them, and that was on Roblox. So it's impossible to. We're kind of trying to protect our children with something that's very, very black and white, and it's so nuanced and it's so complicated. And I just think that ultimately it needs to be about education. I think parents need tools because a lot of them don't understand what's going on and the kids are going to outsmart them. I think the platforms need more rules and the children need education and a safe space. It's so complicated. And it's true, it's an interesting experiment. And here we are debating it, which is brilliant. And this is the start, hopefully, of things maybe starting to change.
Oly, just give us an impression of what your listeners have been saying to you on Talkback. Oly presents one of the most listened to drive programmes in Australia every single day. What was the level of feedback then from Australian parents?
Yeah, they're confused, to be honest, Enda, and those examples are quite right. So if you are using a gaming platform, you can still use that messaging service. YouTube Kids is going to be banned, but in the title of itself is YouTube Kids. So there might be a little bit of inconsistency there. I think that parents are wondering how this is going to work. There's those two schools of thought, where one is giving the parent that obviously extra level of parental responsibility to say this is the law, so you can get off it. Others are saying, how's it going to work? My kid's already addicted to it, or we already decide this is how we parent in our household, and that children can obviously, if they want to use their devices, they're using them in front of mum and dad, not in their bedrooms. So, look, I think it's a bigger overarching picture, isn't it? Where parents right around the world are looking to blame everybody for how their children are being brought up rather than taking responsibility for themselves. Teachers are obviously doing more than just obviously being in the classroom, teaching them the curriculum of the school. They're being asked to discipline and take on more roles of the parental responsibility. So I think for mums and dads in Australia, this is, a big reminder for them as well to actually do their job as being mum and dad. And I think the social experiment idea that the world will be watching how this rolls out and what impact there will have is going to be absolutely fascinating. And whether other companies or other social media platforms that pop up are going to be added to this list or taken off this list, we just do not know. And it's only weeks away. How's it going to work? I think that's the biggest concern that mums and dads obviously have, and we're hearing on the talkback lines.
Will, just come in on that. There was a word there Oly used, confusion amongst parents. I mean, perhaps governments should be educating parents about social media and what it does to their kids.
That's been entirely my point for years. And I think that should be a tax, and the social network should pay for it. That should be part of their cost to operate in every country. As I said, the number of people, and this is, I'm promising I'm not turning this into a rant, but the number of people I see on public transport in the UK talking into a speakerphone, so everybody can hear their conversation. Something like that was not acceptable a decade ago. It's strange how we've kind of lost this understanding of, how to behave with technology. And I think that's definitely something that would also be an equally interesting experiment for a country to try. Maybe the UK could do something through its public broadcaster, for example. It's something I've long believed would benefit and enable parents to understand how technology works, and also the acceptable limits, how long kids should be using a platform. Is it acceptable for them to use it at the dinner table? How many hours a day is okay? None of those things have ever been set out. And I understand it's different slightly for each child, but parents have had no guidance at all.
Thank you, Will. Charlotte, I just want to tell you a little anecdote. I was on holidays the week before last. We were having a family meal, and I saw an Irish family across from my family, and every single child had a tablet. And the parents ate, and the children were not interacting. They weren't talking to the parents. There was absolutely no chat or conversation between the children. they were all engrossed in
Yep.
what was going on in their tablets. It's almost like parents use these devices as a nanny or a babysitter.
I know it is, and I find it equally depressing as a psychologist and as a parent. I got on a flight last week and there was a child reading a book, and I nearly went over to the parent and shook them by the hand, because seeing she was probably a 10-year-old girl reading a book, and that was such a novelty. And I agree with what Will was saying about this thing about on the phone now, it's okay to have people on loudspeaker. It's utterly bewildering. And I know that parents have always struggled to, when you get pregnant, basically, you're given this child, and then no one really tells you what to do with that child, right? There aren't really parenting classes. It's all utterly terrifying. And now social media has added another layer of fear on top of it. And I do find it bewildering that people do use these devices as nannies. I find it really depressing. I think the conversation is dying. I think that COVID obviously also impacts on this. You mustn't forget that, the massive impact that had. I think that's had a huge impact on how we use technology, because that was the only way we could communicate for so long. So I think that parents do have to take responsibility, and I think that yes to education, but there will always be people that no matter what you say to them, they will still want to give their child a device. And it is lazy, slightly depressing parenting.
Thank you, Charlotte. Well said. Oly Peterson in WA, Western Australia, we wish you well. Will in Bristol, and Charlotte here in the studio with me. Thank you all. Fascinating roundtable. And remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for us. Search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.